Hello, my name is Stephen Denman. My organisation is Shining Guidance. My website is shiningguidance.com. I'm going to talk to you today about a subject I find very interesting, and that is faith healing, that some people know by the phrase psychic healing or psychical healing, and even those in the New Age movement have taken it on board to start calling it energy healing to try and give it a greater level of scientific legitimacy. Now, many people will say that faith healing is absolute rubbish. It's pseudo-scientific nonsense. It's irrelevant, but nothing could be further from the truth. If we just scale everything down to the subatomic level, in terms of the science of quantum physics, we have to remember the physical universe should always be viewed and perceived and discerned in three specific ways, and that's in terms of frequency, vibration, and energy. And that's on the macro scale. So if that's going on a macro scale, in terms of frequency, vibration, energy in the physical universe, in the millions and billions of nebulae and galaxies and star systems and the planets and the moons that orbit them, even including asteroids and meteorites and black holes and white holes and pulsars and quasars and everything else, you've got to bring it down and scale it right down to the micro scale. And then you start seeing that the same scientific approach should be applicated. So with faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing, that is also being sort of given the phrase energy healing in the New Age movement, we have to understand that frequency, vibration, and energy is the basis of faith healing or psychical healing. Now, among those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, are very large numbers of those people who unconsciously resonate with faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing on a regular basis, almost in a way that is so unconscious to them, they automatically will gravitate towards the subject area in much higher numbers as opposed to neurotypical individuals. So that's very interesting to note. And we also know, obviously, that individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions tend to be of a much higher level of intelligence. Their cognitive processes are far more advanced. They have a virtually photographic memory. They can retain vast reams and reams of information compared to neurotypical children or, young adults and so forth. So we know that for those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, that can also include, Aspergers syndrome or obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, they tend to resonate unconsciously with the idea and concept of faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing that some people will refer to as energy healing, but they're pretty much all the same thing. If you step back and give them a different perspective and then look at them more closely, take away the terminologies, the various glossaries around these pseudo-scientific subjects, they're predominantly the same thing, whether it's faith healing or psychical healing or energy healing. So there are many, many famous individuals who have really done some fantastic work in their published materials, that's their books, on the idea of faith healing or psychical healing. And much of their work has been used by those individuals who do have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions to try and improve their own psychological and mental well-being and health. Now, we know, for example, that there has been many psychics from the United States of America over the last 70 to 80 years who have done tremendous amounts of work that is utterly profound and has been highly beneficial to improving the psychological and the mental health of any individual, whether they're a child, whether they're an adolescent, a young adult, a middle-aged adult, or an elderly individual who has autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, which may include aspects of Asperger's syndrome or perhaps aspects of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Now, I'm going to discuss these individuals specifically. I feel they should be given a platform. Their work has been so profound. They have created such a beneficial advancement in understanding the psychological and emotional conditions of individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD without actually probably realizing they have done. And the first of these individuals is Edward Andrews. Now, Edward Andrews is commercially better known by the name of Ted Andrews. He was a very famous American author and teacher of esoteric practices. He was a highly potent kind of psychic and clairvoyant. He wrote a number of books on both birds and mammals being astral spirit guides and therefore astral symbols that could be used to benefit the psychological and emotional and ultimately the spiritual well-being of human beings or Homo sapiens who exist and incarnate here on planet Earth in the 3D holographic reality of this material dimension. So the work of Edward Andrews, better known as Ted Andrews, is work that you should all go and do some research into. He was a utterly profound academic. He was a brilliant orator and facilitator and a teacher of esoteric practices and a very, very talented psychic and clairvoyant as well. Now, another individual I want to discuss, and for me personally, I think he's one of the greatest men who's actually ever lived on planet Earth, and that is Ingo Douglas Swann. He's better known as Ingo Swann. He was a very, very powerful psychic and clairvoyant. He was a visionary artist and a prolific author who wrote and published many profound books, pretty much all based either loosely or closely, not just on psychic and clairvoyant types of research and work from his own experiences and from other individuals, some who are academics and scientists, but also he was an individual that took part in scientific remote viewing, or SRV, with the US federal government. So he's a very profound individual. Much of his written materials have proven to be highly beneficial to individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, whether they're children or adolescents or adults, makes no difference. So Ingo Douglas Swann, better known as Ingo Swann, a really quite incredibly profound and fascinating individual to go and research into, and his work has been very helpful and supportive. And again, he would not really have been conscious of how his work could have supported and benefited individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD over the long term, into the 21st century. Now, another individual that I think most people probably have heard of is the very famous American clairvoyant known as Edgar Cayce, who was able to channel his higher self through focusing on his own soul personality. He would go into consistent trance-like states. And obviously, as you all know, his words, his sentences, his paragraphs were transcripted and recorded by a friend of his, and also on many occasions by his wife. And his information has proven to be very beneficial to giving a greater psychological and emotional understanding, as much of his work was based on faith healing, psychic healing, and psychical healing issues, to those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, which, as I've said, can include perhaps those individuals who have Aspergers syndrome, or perhaps they have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Another individual that has proven to be very helpful and beneficial in giving a greater understanding to the connections between the supernatural in reference to faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing amongst those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD type traits and characteristics is Willard Fuller. Now, Willard Fuller was a very famous American faith healer, and he was the proponent of psychic dentistry. So he really, really had a strong understanding of the frequency, vibration, and energy bases and resonances of what really defines faith healing or psychical healing. So another individual there, Willard Fuller, very famous American faith healer, and is someone you should do more research into, a fascinating individual. Now, another person I want to discuss is Dorothy Allison. Now, Dorothy Allison is the self-proclaimed psychic detective. She once lived in the United States of America. She gained nationwide recognition for her skills as a psychic and a clairvoyant. And Dorothy Allison also did a lot of work that at later stages was used to build on research academically into the connections between many individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD type traits and characteristics in regards or in reference to their own unconscious connections and links with the supernatural, specifically, to do with faith healing or psychic healing or, psychical healing. So yeah, her work very beneficial and very, very helpful on many levels. Now, the last individual I want to discuss was very famous in her own right, but not for the same reasons as some of the other individuals that I've mentioned. And her name is Sylvia Celeste Shoemaker, who married and became known as Sylvia Celeste Brown. Now, she was an author of many books who claimed to be a medium with very strong psychic and clairvoyant abilities. She gave many lectures and public talks on how she felt very strongly that she understood the mental health issues of individuals around her, and her work predominantly did focus in many ways on trying to find remediation, and some form of energetic restoration for those individuals who have mental health issues. And of course, that was obviously centrally going to include any individual child or adolescent or adult that has autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions. So we have to then remember, summarizing for these individuals, one thing: their profound and amazing psychic and clairvoyant abilities helped many clients, both as individuals they may have met face to face, people they spoke to over the phone, people that would have written letters to them. And you have to remember also that many of those clients that they did have face to face consultations with or spoke to over the phone would have had traits and characteristics that define them as having autism spectrum disorder or ASD neurological conditions. Then after those individuals had, shall we say, departed from this mortal coil and left behind the 3D holographic reality of this material dimension, the legacies of all their fantastic scientific research kind of basically resonated and lived on, through many other individuals that have promoted their work. And so many generations after they have kind of moved on from this mortal coil, their work is being used beneficially to help many individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions. That can include those individuals perhaps that have traits that will define them as having Aspergers syndrome, or individuals that have obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD issues. So I think with this information, I've given a very interesting and fascinating perspective on the wider aspects of faith healing, that's also known as psychic healing or psychical healing, because it's a subject matter that isn't really given a lot of, shall we say, academic and scientific analysis on any serious level. Like many aspects of what is coined as pseudoscience, it's literally just basically put on a shelf somewhere. People just ignore it. It's not given any real credence because they're all waiting, shall we say, on the mainstream media to legitimize its authenticity. So they're all waiting for perhaps TV channels like the BBC or like ITV or Channel 4 or Channel 5 to come along, whether it's here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain or anywhere else, and say, yeah, okay, faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing is real, it's authentic, it's been proven scientifically to be real. Because you've got to understand that the pharmaceutical industries and the very synthetic basis of a lot of the Western healthcare systems are really based on not wanting to focus on using faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing. Because if human beings can automatically, rely on their own potency, going into their own soul personality resonances, going into their own unconscious minds, and realize they've actually got the ability to self-heal, self-restore, and completely remediate their own biological medical health in a very profound, proactive and positive way, without any needing of reaching out to a general practitioner or a GP, in their local healthcare services, to give them a prescription drug to sort of, to somehow solve the problem. Then suddenly it's a form of self-empowerment. And if it's individually going to be self-empowerment that's taking place, it will be collectively and communally a form of self-empowerment that really is going to override the current mindsets amongst millions upon billions of human beings or Homo sapiens that have decided unconsciously to kind of just wander through life here on planet Earth in the 3D holographic reality of the material dimension, who don't want to be consciously aware, who don't want to be spiritually awakened. But many individuals, whether they're children, adolescents, or adults that have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, do unconsciously, on a much more intense level, have a spiritual longing. I've seen it much myself with many of them, and they really seek to understand and to reach out and to understand the divine love of the universal creator of heaven and earth and every eternal parallel dimension, parallel reality, and parallel universe forever and ever and ever. It's not something that they think is unimportant. But because there is a fear in those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions to openly express their spiritual, or shall we say supernal natures in front of their peers, in front of their own age groups and demographics, because they're frightened of being ridiculed, again, suffering from further social isolation, rejection, and abandonment, and then having to retreat further because they're feeling challenged in some way, also, because their fixated routines are not. Bolstering them up and making them feel protected, and they're having to question the very rigid sense of perception they have of the 3D holographic reality of the material dimension they have around them. It gets increasingly more difficult as they get older unless there's some kind of proactive intervention and remediation. And one of the ways that is through the use of faith healing or energy healing, as it's sometimes called. And I know faith healing is the more common phrase, but in the New Age, the New Age movement and the New Age community, as they're phrased, it is now called energy healing. But, traditionally faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing, goes back to, tribal communities where the village shaman would use their own versions of faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing to restore the mental health, the psychological and emotional health of their own communities on an individual and a collective level if there was traumas that needed to be resolved. So we know that this subject is important. We know that it has great relevance to the future, actually, I believe, of human spirituality and human psychology on planet Earth. And I do believe that as we head on towards 2025, 2030, 2035, and 2040 onwards here, we're going to see much greater relevance and importance placed on subjects to do with human psychology and human spirituality, the likes of which we've never seen before, because mental health issues, I feel, are becoming so important to deal with, and therefore readdressing the relevance and importance of faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing here on planet Earth in this day and age is going to become increasingly more important and relevant. And at the centre of a lot of that are going to be individuals, whether they're children, adolescents, or adults, who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, because they tend to have much higher levels of intelligence, memory retainment, which is predominantly almost photographic on many occasions. They are individuals that are, they tend to be more sensitive in many ways, more empathic, more compassionate, but the way they convey their empathy and compassion is quite different because of their social abnormalities. They find it difficult how to express that, shall we say, in their body language, their facial expressions, their gestures, their eye contact or lack of eye contact. And so I feel that autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions are going to be given much greater connected academic, shall we say, focus and importance in reference and in regards to faith healing and psychic healing, and therefore psychical healing, as we move on through, shall we say, 2025 into 2030, 2035 and 2040. And so, I think with the information I've conveyed here, I've given you a lot of insight. You've really been given here some quite profound and rather dynamic perspectives on the connections between autism spectrum disorder or ASD traits and characteristics and faith healing, or shall we say, psychic healing or psychical healing, that the New Age movement or the New Age community like to call energy healing. But I do really think that we're going to see in really the next few years a profound both change, shall we say, on a local, regional, national and international and therefore global level, in terms and in reference of how the importance of using faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing in a correct and timely manner can actually help with dealing with mental and psychological issues that those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions literally they experience on a day by day, week by week, month by month basis throughout their entire lifetimes on planet Earth, as well as amongst neurotypical individuals, of course. And it will also be seen by many more academics, and over the time periods that I've just given, that those individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions, shall we say, at a much greater level, have an unconscious interest and connection with faith healing or psychic healing or psychical healing. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching my video presentation. It's been a pleasure presenting this information to you. There'll be many more videos to come. And on that note, thanks very much, folks, and goodbye.